Today, I'd like to address some of the questions from the commentators. Got that right this time. And they were saying, well, just how do you follow things, that you're watching where money flows? My thought process on this is something like this. We have thousands of companies that you have to watch, every kind of industry and global, local, everything's different. And you have all the things from the government you have to know, all the overseas stuff. There's so much to know. So the thing is that anything of size will be connected to a big bank, right? Anything that goes on has to have a big bank, and normally a global bank. Well, we have 29 GSIBs, so that's better than tens of thousands of information nodes. You got 29. One of them, State Street, which is a custodian bank, but we can talk about that later. So the first thing I'd like, so the 29 banks, they're all different too. You have like investment banks that have a bank attached to them. Then you have big banks, JP Morgan, that have investment banks attached to them. They all have their different expertise. And so you can tell someone's more of a lender, that's their relationship, versus an investment banking relationship. Not that they don't try to lend to them, and not that they don't try to do the investment banking. Everyone has their expertise. So now you can understand the relationship that a big firm may have with these different institutions. And the one thing that these institutions have to do is that they have to have annual reports out. So you pick the institutions you want to watch and you read the annual reports. And then also with the investment banks, they do all the deals, or most of them. And when they do the deal, the companies have to file prospectus. The one thing they can't lie about, because they'll go to jail. Tough to follow. They use words that we may not understand. Takes time, but that's where you know what's actually going on. Okay? So between just following the banks and their transactions, you then start getting into how the banks work, what is their lending, and so forth. Takes time, again. But once you learn that, then you can understand if a bank is having issues with somebody, or at least you should go look into the issue. That's the other thing I should say. They're never going to have a press release. You have to go through the news yourself and watch and say, oh, what does that mean? And go look at it. And then finally, I'll say this. I think everyone knows and believes that the great financial crisis was caused by the banks. And I would agree with that. And we'll discuss that another day. But here's the deal. And you're seeing it in the Treasury market now. In the great financial crisis, the hedge funds were not a participant in the Treasury market virtually at all. They had some strategies, but it wasn't anything to them. And the banks were like 50% of all the treasuries. Now, 2024, the banks are 22% of the treasury market, and the hedge funds are 20%. All right, now this is an involved subject, and I did a video literally a year ago. I couldn't believe it. 418. I pinned it here on TikTok, and I know I have to upload it a different way, and I'll send it over to X. So that video, first I'm going to apologize because I used captions in those days, and I'm not going to say I'm a technological whiz, and the captions basically go right across my face, so I apologize. No way to remove it. And but I have to say, the video is, a year ago, it was good. So I would highly recommend that you watch it. Now, once you understand the things that you need to watch, then you become just a data point. That's all you want, is a data point. You don't care what their earnings are. It doesn't matter. What matters is what is their capital structure, right? And how do they interact with the markets? So let's go through some news now that I'm watching that I have great interest in. And the first one, of course, is UBS. So everyone knows, I've been saying it for 3 years, since SVB, that the two most problematic. In those days, it was three. It was Credit Suisse, UBS, and Deutsche Bank. And now it's UBS and Deutsche Bank. So they're the most problematic banks. Not saying everybody else doesn't have problems. I said the most problematic. Now, UBS has a vote coming up in Switzerland. They vote on things. I'm going to show you this. And what they vote on is whether they're going to increase UBS's capital by 50%, which is $25 billion. Okay? UBS is fighting its tooth and nail, swear they want to leave the country and all this other stuff. They can't. They can't leave. So what does that mean to UBS? 25 billion, probably 15 times leverage, right? It's 375 billion. They have a $1.7 trillion balance sheet. Now it goes down to $1.3 trillion. So less fees, less stock buybacks, less dividends, and of course, less executive comp. So they don't want to go down that road at all. They're threatening, but I think the Swiss are going to vote that way. So that's the first thing. So now let's look at some news items that I'm seeing. If you go watch the pinned video from a year ago, remember this part here, okay? This has just come out from the Fed, right? The large banks with substantial trading, so all of them, right, or custodial operations, they're talking State Street, are also required to incorporate a counterparty default scenario. Remember, we just did counterparties like a week or two, right? And this is our big weakness. So they're literally saying, come up with a scenario if your biggest counterparty goes, not if three small ones goes, just your biggest. So my observation is we're doing this now. We should have done this a long time ago. The other thing is the custodial operations, which is State Street Bank. Remember that when you watch the other video, okay? Now, this is back to UBS indirectly, okay? So they just had a vote in Switzerland. They argued whether they should take their 46 billion Swiss franc Swiss public pension fund out of State Street and bring it back to Switzerland. And they debate this and they voted on it 98-89, all right, that no, we're going to leave it there for now. And the debate was around the expenses. I think they would be significant, right? When you think of all the people, all the paperwork, it's just like be unbelievably expensive. And I would say probably take a couple of years at least, right? Because you can't make a mistake. It's got to go over there, right? Or people lose money. But what's interesting is in their debate, so they were afraid of the administration taking the money. So they wanted to move. But it cost a lot of money. It would take a couple of years anyhow. And then finally, I think the deciding thing was it would have to go to UBS. And look at what they're doing with UBS now. So no, they didn't go, and UBS lost out. Someone asked me the other day, do you think there's still, swaps out from the CS merger with UBS? And the answer is yeah, we found out. Fact is the FFTC just forgave them, all right, saying, okay, we're not going to punish you because when you moved over these derivative swaps into your book, you didn't put any capital against them. They held them on their book for nothing. So I read that two ways. I don't know how big. They don't tell you how big the swaps were size-wise, right? But I bet it was pretty big, and they're probably dead, okay? And basically a write-off. They don't want to write them off. So they hold them on their books, but they don't want to put any capital against it. And so they played games, and they got caught. I don't know what they're going to do now. But that just shows you how this all comes down. So the last item is that Deutsche Bank pulls in a $1.5 billion at, I think, 7.5%, and an AT1 bond. AT1 bonds were designed after the Great Financial Crisis so that if a bank goes belly up, they can turn it into equity and write it off against losses, okay? There's all kinds of rules around this stuff, and this is where there's a big lawsuit in Switzerland because Credit Suisse actually did this to 3 bond funds, and everyone's suing them saying that you didn't have the right to do it. So I don't know how that's going to turn out, but that just gives you an example. They're raising capital. This is a cheap way of raising capital. So what do you think? Like and follow, and tell me in the comments.